Hi, I'm Kay Brooks, and welcome to my very first ever video recording and book read aloud. I have a great book to read today. It's called Wonderstruck. I had no idea this book was this good when I ordered it. It's by Brian Selznick. It's for middle school, but it's a picture book, which makes it so unique. So part of the time I'm going to be reading, and part of the time I'm going to be showing the pictures, such as these. They're pencil drawings, which he also did. And I think to put the book in a little bit of context, I'm going to read what was inside here, just to give you some clues when you're looking at the pictures for the first time. Ben and Rose secretly wish their lives were different. Ben longs for the father he has never known. Rose dreams of a mysterious actress whose life she chronicles in a scrapbook. When Ben discovers a puzzling clue in his mother's room, and Rose reads an enticing headline in the newspaper, both children set out alone on desperate quests to find what they are missing. And the thing with this book is that those two stories are set 50 years apart. The text will be Brian's words. The pictures will tell Rose's story. But I will show you the back of the book and connect it with the front of the book before we even get started. It's going to get closer and closer, just like it does in the front. You might look at these pictures and even though I haven't started the book, try to think maybe what the author's trying to say. The end. So here's the beginning. Wonderstruck. Again, it's going to get closer and closer. I just wonder if anybody else sees the connection, the similarity between the beginning and the end. Gunflint Lake, Minnesota, June 1977, and this will be Brian's story. Part 1. Something hit Ben Wilson and he opened his eyes. The wolves had been chasing him again, and his heart was pounding. He sat up in the dark room and rubbed his arm. He picked up the shoe his cousin had thrown at him and dropped it on the floor. "That hurt, Robbie." Robbie muttered a few words. "What?" Ben asked. What? Can't you hear me? Are you deaf?" Robbie, along with practically everyone else on Gunflint Lake, knew that Ben had been born deaf in one ear. But he still thought it was funny to ask Ben this all the time, even in the middle of the night. He repeated himself for Ben. "I said, stop yelling in your sleep." In the corner of the room, Robbie's hunting rifle glinted in the moonlight. Piled nearby were his fishing rod, pocket knife, bow, arrows, handmade spears, and slingshots of varying sizes. Robbie seemed to go out of his way to collect dangerous things. Ben lay back down on the old cot, squeezed between the dresser and the window. The electric fan was broken, and both boys were shirtless and sweating in the summer heat. Their blankets were thrown uselessly to the side. Their hair was matted to their foreheads. Ben's hands were still shaking from the dream. Ever since the accident, the wolves had appeared, galloping across the moonlit snow, red tongues wagging and white teeth glistening. He couldn't figure out why they were stalking him because he used to love wolves. He and his mom had even seen one once from the front porch of their house. The wolf had looked beautiful and mysterious, like it had stepped out of a storybook. Outside, the wind picked up and rustled through the leaves on the giant trees surrounding the house. Voices droned from Robbie's CB radio, which he insisted stay on all night. It didn't bother Ben that much. Being deaf in one ear had its advantages. He could sleep with his good ear on the pillow to block out all the noise. Ben used a similar trick in school. He'd lean his good ear on his hand when he wanted to tune out his teacher or his classmates. It made it easier to read the books about outer space that he hid in his desk. I wish I didn't have to share my room with you anymore, Robbie said before drifting back to sleep. Ben silently agreed. A familiar noise caught his attention, and he put his good ear against the wall. It's been 3 months since she died, Jenny. We've got to talk about selling it. Ben knew right away as Aunt Jenny and Uncle Steve were talking about his house again. Elaine loved that house, Steve, Aunt Jenny countered. And our grandfather built these houses and the little guest cabin. It's not so easy to sell something that's part of our family. Can't we just leave it be for now? Ben could picture his aunt tightening her ponytail as she said this, a habit she shared with Robbie's older sister, Janet. His mom had done it as well when she had something serious to say. We're going to have to sell it sooner or later, Uncle Steve said. It can't sit there untouched forever. We have bills to pay, and now we have Ben. You've booked hunting and fishing trips with 3 lodges for nearly the entire season, and I'm cooking at Gunflint Lodge. We'll be fine. Yes, but the money doesn't last all year. Summer's just starting, Steve. Do we really have to worry about this now? A long silence followed. Growing up, Ben had never thought about who owned his house. It had always belonged to him and his mom. But now it seemed as if it was his aunts and uncles. Why wasn't it still Ben's? Could a kid even own a house? After the funeral in March, Ben had figured he'd be able to go back into his house whenever he wanted, considering it was only 83 steps away from his cousin's. But the more time passed, the more afraid he was to walk through the front door again without his mom there to greet him on the other side. There weren't many houses on the lake. His house and his cousin's house were the 2 closest to one another. Ben missed the cluttered coziness of his house. The little tables, the mismatched chairs, old clocks, quotes his mom had carefully clipped and taped to the refrigerator, prints of her favorite artwork, rusted cogs and wheels, and other interesting things Ben had scavenged on their walks around the lake and in towns, their record collection, the stone fireplace, their prized moose antler found along the Gunflint Trail, and of course all their books, which spilled out of the bookcases and were stacked in piles around the house. If his aunt and uncle sold his house, wondered Ben, what would happen to all his stuff? What would happen to his mom's stuff? Who would live there? Maybe he could move all their things to the little guest cabin. When the cousins were little, they used to play there if a visitor wasn't using it. They pretended it was a witch's castle or a pirate ship. Even though it was only 100 yards further down the lake, it felt miles away from the grown-ups. That all seemed like another lifetime now. The argument between his aunt and uncle had subsided, and the clock down the hall chimed midnight. Unable to keep his eyes closed, Ben reached beneath his cot for his red plastic flashlight and the wood box that he kept hidden there. The box was about the size of his math textbook. It was shiny brown and smooth to the touch. The bottom was covered in soft green felt. On the lid was an engraving of a wolf. One of the artists in town had made it, and Ben's mom had given it to him for Christmas last year. The box, the flashlight, and 2 suitcases full of his clothes were the only things he'd brought with him when he moved into Robbie's room. Ben turned on the flashlight, pulled a key from the pocket of his pants, which lay folded on the floor, and opened the small brass lock on the front of the box. One at a time, he touched the little items inside. He had organized them between cardboard dividers, giving each one a special section. Among other things, he had several oddly shaped twigs, his last baby tooth, a little plastic game piece he'd found behind the school with his friend Billy, who always teased him for picking up garbage, a bird skull, and a fossil called stromatolite that he discovered while hiking the ridges near Gunflint Lake. In the bottom right-hand corner of the cardboard grid were two small bumpy gray stones. Ben picked one up and turned it in his palm. When he had showed them to his mom, she told him that these stones, called ejecta, as well as the entire area where they lived, had been created nearly 2 billion years ago by a meteorite crash across the lake in Canada. After that, Ben became fascinated by the stars in outer space, so his mom brought him to the library where she worked and showed him all the books about the night sky. Sitting beside her at her big orange desk, its papers and books piled taller than he'd been at the time, he'd found a diagram of the Big Dipper, which pointed to the North Star. The North Star was the last star in the tail of the Little Dipper, and the book said that travelers had used the star for centuries to find their way when they were lost. If you were ever lost, his mom had said when he showed her the book, just find the North Star and it will lead you home. His mom smiled and pointed to a bulletin board across her desk. Unlike the refrigerator at home, it had just one quote taped to it. Ben read it aloud. We are all in the gutter, but some of us are looking at the stars. And I'm going to jump ahead and start Rose's story. Hoboken, New Jersey, October 1927. As you can see, this is 50 years ago. And her story will have no words. It will be in pictures. And although you don't know what's going on yet, look at the pictures and try to figure out for yourself what the author might be trying to say. The wolves kind of zoomed in. These pictures will be zooming out. I believe all these drawings are done with pencil, like entirely in pencil. That's just fabulous. The detail. When you have this book in your hands for yourself, you can see more and more detail. Every time I look at these pictures, I see something new. Now she will be in the window, one of the top windows. There's just, you can barely see her. Now this is jumping to a different scene entirely. You might wonder what kind of a expression she has on her face. What kind of emotion do you think she's feeling? Look at her eyes. And I'm going to stop at the next page, which I don't know if you can see it, but it says teaching on the book. And we will continue when I see you next time. Thanks for watching.